Oh, I thought we were already back live. Okay. Good questions. I mean, this is where the water hits the wheel, you know, the questions that you're asking. Okay, now you're inside the door. You want to try to get them seated. We had one situation where we got inside the door and the woman was so adamant wanting to know what was going on. We told her standing up. Her knees buckled. She was going down. I mean, she was going to faint. Deputy caught one arm, I caught the other. You don't know how people are going to respond, but you want to try to get them seated. Again, you want to verify your information. Is your husband's name John J. Jones? Yes, it is. Is his birthday June 1st, 1950? Yes, it is. Now, you're trying to, as best as you can, you're trying to verify who you got. You know, the situation I described to you where it was going to be on the 6 o'clock news, we actually wound up getting the wrong one. This one right here. We got the wrong person. Same name. Same age. They were cousins. We got the wrong one. Was it intentional? No. We were trying as best as we could to find a family member. We got the wrong one. I don't know if the woman did not catch the middle initial or we didn't say. I don't remember because the deputy took the lead on this one. But we got the wrong one. And I knew we were in trouble after we got her seated at the table and the deputy gets a call on his cell phone and turns white. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, I don't know what it is, but we're in trouble. And sure enough, we had the wrong one. Now, I would be so relieved that my loved one was okay that I'd be glad and sad. But, you know, that liability thing, you know, that's the only time in 18 years I've had to write a report on a death notification. And it was a cover your backside kind of thing because we didn't know if they were going to sue us for traumatizing her. We weren't trying to traumatize her. We just got the wrong one. So anyway, so now you're at the other two parts of the 5 steps from Iowa. In plain language and with compassion, you tell them, Mrs. Jones, I'm sorry to have to bring this kind of news to you, but your husband John was involved in an accident, and he died as a result of the accident. Now, there's not very many things that I will say, never, ever, ever, ever do this. Here's one of them. Don't ever, when you're making that initial notification, talk about passing away or not making it or any of those euphemisms that people use for people dying. You don't want any mistake here. You want them to understand very clearly somebody's dead. You know, fish die, goldfish die, batteries die, people pass away. No, people die. And you want to say that with as much compassion as you possibly can. Now, you're still in that stage where whoever's taking the lead is talking here. And again, it may be you and it may be the officer. I've done them both ways. You don't want to give any false ray of hope. You want to use the person's name. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but John was involved in an accident. And John, well, it couldn't be. He just went to the store to get some milk. Yeah, that's true. Well, you're just making all this up. No, ma'am, we don't do that. You know, you will get all kinds of verbal responses from people. That's part of denial. They'll want details, but they're not going to hear much that you say after you say somebody's dead. And you've probably observed this in the waiting room. One of your church members is in for surgery. The doctor comes out and says, we found cancer. Do they hear anything after they hear the C word? They don't hear the doctor say, but we got it all. And he's not even going to have radiation. They don't even hear that. Same thing with this. Now, here's where you tag team. If you had taken the lead and you actually make the notification, the officer can fill in some of the information about what happened. Understand this, though. This officer may have been given the assignment, may not have been at the scene. He may not know exactly what happened. If it's a fatality accident, your fatality accident team's going to be investigating it, and you can always say, well, it's still under investigation, but this is what it appears to be, and you give them some information. There have been times when we've had a suicide when we have said, it appears to be a suicide. There have been other times when the department says, don't say suicide. We're pretty sure, but don't say suicide. There's a whole different grief modem that sets in on a suicide than any other kind of death.
So how much information you share is kind of on a case-by-case basis?
Yes, yes. And that's where you've got to communicate with the officer that you're with before you get to the door. How much are we going to tell them? Very valid, very good question, because it does vary. I can't give you a rule of thumb for that. But this is certainly an area where you can be helpful as a chaplain, because, you know, the pat on the shoulder, you know, the pat on their arm, you know, you would probably feel comfortable doing that. Officers may not. And you will get some, and the ones that scare me the most are the deer in the headlights. So-and-so's dead and you got nothing. I mean, there's no response. And you just wait, you're just waiting for the dam to break, you know, and you got nothing. Those scare me, because that to me, that's like, you know, there's going to be an explosion here. Am I going to be here when it happens or not? You know, so. Now, at some point, and there's going to be a little time in here, and again, that varies by the response of the person. How much do they want to know about the incident? Are they blubbering? Are they crying? Are they slinging snot? You know, the whole bit. You know, where are you in that? When it comes down a notch or two, then you say to them, is there a pastor, minister, priest, someone I can call for you? If they say, don't have anybody, well, can I call a neighbor? Can I call do you have any relatives close by that we could call for you? Now, here's how that phone conversation would go. If they say, yeah, please call my pastor. My pastor's name is such and such. They're probably not going to know the number, because your parts of your brain shut down when you get this kind of information. So I would probably contact dispatch, either by phone or by radio, say, we need to contact Pastor Sam Smith at the First Methodist Church. So dispatch would patch me through, and I would be on the phone. Usually contacting pastor is me or the chaplain. And I would say, I'd get Sam on the phone. Sorry to wake you up, Sam. You know, 3 o'clock in the morning. This is Bobby Payne. I'm calling in my capacity as chaplain with the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office. So he knows I'm not calling about playing tennis or going out to eat or something, you know. Wouldn't call him for that at 3 o'clock in the morning anyway. I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. John J. Jones. Okay. You hear a name, Pastor, what do you do? Okay, they come about every 2 weeks and they sit on the left side of the church. I know how this works. Okay, so he's got a visual. You know, okay, Joni. Okay, I know Joni. Yeah, okay. I said, she's asked me to contact you. Her husband, John, was involved in an accident, and he died as a result of the accident. Could you come, wherever we are, could you come to her house? Now, whatever I have told him, I've asked for permission from the family member. Can I explain to them that there's been a death? Yeah, I mean, if they want you to call a pastor, they want you to tell them, yeah, why you're calling. I mean, I've never had one say no. Just tell them to get here. And I've never had that. I've had pastors say, I'll check on them in the morning. Yeah. So then, you know, that's in motion. Depending on what the situation is, at some point I usually offer to pray with them. You don't force that. You don't say, well, let's gather around and hold hands and pray. No. You offer. Would you like me to pray with you? And I've had a lot of people say no. So you pray for them without them knowing that you're praying for them, and you say something like, you know, when I spend time with the Lord, I'll be remembering you and your family and asking the Lord to bring comfort to your life. Well, what'd you do? You just prayed for them. You just didn't put on your ministerial voice and bow your head and close your eyes. You still want to talk about the person that died in terms of their name, because that's not evidence to them. That's not the body to them. That's John to them. So you still talk about John. Then you start preparing them for whatever may happen next. You know, his body's going to be taken. The officers indicated there will be an autopsy. I mean, you find out if the officer wants you to tell him that.
Wouldn't the body typically go to the hospital or the emergency room or something like that?
Not necessarily. You know, if it's a fatality accident, you know, they've got to draw legal blood. So yeah, it would probably go to the hospital morgue first. If it's a suicide, might go to the hospital for toxicology, drawing blood again. There are instances, home death, not a hospice, where they might take them directly to the other morgue in Gibbon. Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah.
I was thinking if there's an accident, typically the EMTs or the first responders or something like that would take it to the emergency room or something.
If they're dead at the scene, the EMTs will not remove the body, because they have to bring in the fatality accident investigation team. They will leave the body right where it is. It may be there 4 or 5 hours before they actually remove the body from the scene. If it's some other kind of death, they may transport them, but generally speaking, if they get there and somebody's dead, the paramedics will not transport the body. It'll be a funeral home transporting them.
But I assume it's not a police officer's job to determine life or death. It's somebody from a medical capacity needs to make that. Does the coroner have to show and pronounce them?
Well, yes and no. Our officers handle coroner calls.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is a change in the law about 2 years ago, which is when you were out of state. But used to, we had to call a deputy. It was county law enforcement specific. You had to call a deputy when you had a dead body. They had to come and say, "Yep, they're dead," you know. But now they tweaked the law a little bit, so now we don't have to call a deputy. A police officer can say, "Yes, this person is dead." Yeah, and I'm sure that's the same way it is in this county. Now, some jurisdictions have medical examiners, and you don't do anything till the medical examiner gets to the scene. But there is a point when an officer, even on a hospice, officer's going to take pictures. Officer's going to look for marks on the body. Officer's going to talk to family members or the hospice nurse. And the officer will determine when the funeral home can take the body. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, not knowing how the procedure and the channels work.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's so convoluted. It really is. But from an evidence standpoint, you know, this person was found dead at home. You would want to be sure that somebody didn't murder him. I mean, you would want to know that as a family, that, you know, somebody didn't sneak in. Yeah, no foul play involved. Well, to do that, there's going to have to be an autopsy. That's the whole. It's not pointing fingers at anybody. It's really trying to protect people, that there was no foul play, that this is, you know, just a home death. He just died. Nobody stuffed a pillow over his face and, you know, smothered him. But yeah, officer, and many times, you know, if the officer's kind of wavering, you know, I'm not sure about autopsy. Generally, the county attorney will make the call on autopsy, or whichever county attorney is on call. And I'm pretty sure this is right. Without exception, on an unattended death, let me back up. Without exception, on a death, the county attorneys will be contacted. And the officer will explain, well, this was a hospice death. And they'll say, no autopsy. I mean, that's pretty much automatic. If it's a hospice, there's not going to be an autopsy. But every death, they will contact the county attorney's office, and the county attorney's office will then give direction on what to do. So you got two different functions here. Essentially, the officer is doing the coroner role, but the final determination on whether there's an autopsy is county attorney's office. There are times when the county attorney will come to the scene. You know, we've had, on suicides, we've had county attorneys show up at the scene. I'm not sure exactly why, other than the legal process of evidence.
I know that varies from state to state. Does that vary within Nebraska from county to county?
It could. It could. I think the general rule is a law enforcement officer, that could be police officer, sheriff's deputy, could serve in the coroner function. I'm pretty sure that's right. Oh yeah, in Nebraska, you have to, if there's a death, you got to call law enforcement. Doesn't matter what kind of death it is, you got to call law enforcement. Yeah, and dealing with suicide survivors is a whole different trip. Which we might add that to your training list sometime if you want, how to deal with suicide survivors. Because if you've ever dealt with a suicide, it's a tough thing. Okay, real quickly we'll walk through some of these survivor needs and what to say and what not to say. This is on page 6 of the death notification handout. They need to let their emotions out. I've had funeral directors tell me that non-white folks do better in grief than white folks. Why? Non-Anglos. Mm-hmm. What do we tell people? Get yourself under control. They let it out. They holler. They scream. They wail. They do better in grief than we do. Something to learn there. They need some semblance of authority, some semblance of control. You kind of prepare them for what's going to happen. We talked about several different things. You know, you're going to go in to view the body. Here's what you're going to see. You predict and prepare them. You tell them there's going to be an autopsy. You're preparing them. What do I do next? I always encourage people to get a pad and a pencil and have it available. As they think of questions, write them down. As they think of someone they need to call, write it down so that you know whether you called that person or not. Check it off when you called them. You know, that kind of. Give them something here, something they can do, because they want something to do. Some things not to say. You've heard well-intentioned people say incredibly stupid things, haven't you? I know how you feel. No, you don't. Maybe this was an abuse situation. She was planning to kill him that night. And inside she's going, yes, he's gone. Outside, oh, my husband's dead. You don't know how they feel. You may know some of the things they are feeling, but you don't know how they feel. You'll get over this. Right after you make a death notification is not the time to tell them that. They're not going to believe you anyway. Get on with your life. Also, that's not a real good thing to say right after you said your husband's not coming home. Just doesn't fit. He didn't know what hit him. Now, that's often in response to the question, did my loved one suffer? Well, you may not know the answer to that. You know, particularly if you and or the officer have not been to the scene, you may not know that the car laid on top of him for 30 minutes before he died. So, you know, there's not a lot of comfort in he didn't know what hit him. It's just, you know, avoid that. You can find someone worse off than yourself. At that particular moment, they don't think there's anybody worse off in the entire world. Their normal has been redefined. See, that's the fallacy of telling someone to get their life back to normal. Normal no longer exists. The normal that they knew yesterday doesn't exist today. People will talk about closure. Closure does not exist. You can learn to deal with the reality of the death. You can get on with your life. You can reinvest your life. There's never closure. There's always going to be an empty dinner plate at Christmas. Focus on your memories. Are memories important? Yes, they are. Are memories helpful in the healing process in grief? Yes, they are. Is this the time to tell them? No, it's not. Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Boy, that'd be comforting, wouldn't it? Disempowering statements. You don't need to know that. What does that imply? Yeah, you're hiding something. Yeah, we're withholding information. What you don't know won't hurt you. Same kind of thing. The implication is, you're not telling me everything. If you say, I can't tell you that because you don't know the answer to that, you need to say, I can't tell you that because I don't know the answer to that. I can't tell you that because I was not at the scene. But if you say, I can't tell you that, it's in the same vein. It means you're withholding something from me that I should know about. God cliches. Must have been his or her time. Well, none of us really are privy to the timetable of God, so it's probably best to not speculate. Yeah. Someday you'll understand why. If you're dealing with a suicide, that day will never come. It was actually a blessing because. Now, you may hear that in a hospice situation. If the family says that, okay, don't you say it. Does that make sense? You kind of understand that one? God must have needed her more than you. You suppose if a pastor in Newtown, Connecticut had told one of the mothers of one of those kids that was killed that God must have needed them more than you, what do you think the mom would have done? Yeah, God. Bam. Yeah, that's just cruel. And besides that, you're making God the bad guy. You know? God never gives us more than we can handle. Okay, first of all, that's a misquote of Scripture.
That's not true because mental hospitals are full of them.
Yeah, yeah. But this is how this passage is interpreted by society. The passage says you're not going to be tempted beyond what you can bear, but with the temptation comes a way of escape. It doesn't have anything to do with this. And like you say, it's a lie anyway. Only the good die young. Well, we all know that's not true. Unhealthy expectations. Be strong for your family. The best thing we can do is tell people to cry. They have proven medically, and the name's about this long. I can't even put all the syllables together. They have determined medically that there is a toxin, and that's what they call it. A toxin is produced in the human body at a time of grief that only comes out through the tear ducts. You can't run it off. You can't burn it off. It has to come out through the tear ducts. So when the old timer said you need to have a good cry, they actually knew what they were talking about. They didn't know why they were talking about it that way. But that's the only way to get it out. Worst thing we can do to people is say, don't cry. Let it out. Get a hold of yourself. Well, that's more because we're uncomfortable than they are. And you start dealing with grief, and grief is such a powerful thing. It's a natural response to loss. Any kind of loss. Divorce, a move, your house gets hit by a tornado, you grieve, all that kind of stuff. Some things to say, always appropriate to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. It's harder than people think. People who have gone through this experience similar things. You're not saying, I know how you feel. If I were in your situation, I would feel this way. Again, you're normalizing their feelings. You're relating to them. Now, if you say, I will check back with you tomorrow, Chaplain, you better do that one. Because I guarantee you, They won't remember anything else about it. But they'll remember that chaplain said they were going to contact me the next day, and they didn't do it. And they will remember that. Okay, step 4, when you leave the door, your policy, your department policy may require a written report, may not. Like I said, I've done one in 18 years. So, and the reason for that is my department wants to keep me out of court. I'm okay with that. Follow up with the officer, check on the officer. The situation I described to you where we actually wound up getting the wrong one. On the way back to the cruiser, I turned to the deputy and I said, "Are you okay?" That's all I said. What would be the typical cop response to that? "Oh yeah, I'm fine." Yeah. 3 days later, through the department grapevine, I learned that no one had ever asked him how he was after a death notification. It does impact them. They're not the cold-hearted folks you see on TV. We had an officer who had an aunt was killed in an accident. Somebody pulled across the center line, smacked her head on, dead right there. 2 months later, he had to make a death notification. Same situation. Somebody pulled across the center line, smacked somebody's head on, dead right there. Talking about knocking the props out from under a cop. He was a mess. So check on your officer. Let dispatch know. Talk about it on the way back to the station if you're riding with the officer. What went well? What could we have done better? Anything you see? Sometimes you're going to go, did the best we could with what we got.
What are the typical scenarios that'll pull in a police department for a death notification? Obviously, traffic accident.
Right.
And anything.
Suicide. Drowning.
Okay, drowning. Accidental death.
Any kind of accidental death. Yeah. Well, like we had the guy went into one of the pits out by the construction site on a heavy piece of machinery. I was the liaison at the scene between law enforcement and his son, who was also working at the scene. Hospice. The chaplains are usually not called on hospice calls. Generally, the hospice organization, the hospice organization usually has a chaplain assigned to the family. So usually we don't get those. If you happen to be riding along, which has happened to me a couple of times, riding along, get a hospice call, then you're there. But
If the hospice is out of town or out of state, you could get a call that way.
could, yeah. Now, generally speaking, I might make a real general statement here. Generally speaking, at a death scene, home, fatality, accident, whatever it is, generally, if family is there, and whatever state they're in, the officer will offer a chaplain. If they say no, they don't contact us. Pretty much without exception. I think it's pretty much policy. It's not maybe an official policy. If a death notification has to be made, they will contact a chaplain to go with the officer to make the death notification. Doesn't matter what kind of death it is. If we got to make a notification, they'll call us because they don't want the officers going by themselves. Same things are going to apply at the hospital. You're just going to have to work with medical staff. You're probably going to have to tell medical staff what's going on, that there's been a death, that you need to share some information because of the medical stuff. But, you don't want to do it in the hallway either. Try to find some place that you can get them, if at all possible. At businesses, you're going to have to talk with the supervisor probably to get the person out of the back area where they work, get them to come up to the human resources office or something. You want to try to limit what you tell the supervisor as much as you can, but some supervisors are going to say, if you don't tell me what's going on, you're not going to talk to them. Okay, so you tell them. But you're going to basically you're going to do the same thing. You're going to confirm identity. Is your husband's name John J. Jones? Yeah, is his birthday this? Okay, we're sorry to have to come to work to tell you this, but so questions, comments? There's some other real specialized things that we're really not going to cover because your death notification stuff is going to be the same wherever you are. But homicides, line of duty deaths, and I hope you never have to deal with line of duty death. But your procedure is going to be basically the same. So thoughts, questions, observations?
When you did those few that you said you knew, would you ever find yourself recusing you from that and get another chaplain and someone go instead of you?
Haven't. My wife's a teacher, and her colleagues all know this is one of the things I do, and they say you're not welcome at my house except by invitation. And then in the next breath they say, but if something happened, I'd want you to make the notification. It's a two-edged sword.
When they see you pull up, they see the officer pull up, they know exactly.
They know, yeah, if I'm with an officer, they know somebody's dead.
Yeah, we did that once there in Missouri. I went with the officer, and it happened to be a young man that I worked for his dad, and we knew him real well. You know, a town of 800 people.
Oh, yeah.
So we pull up, and the mom sees us pull up and sees us together, and she's come running out, asking which one of her kids it was, because all three of them were gone that night. So she knew what it was, and it happened to be her son. That it was actually his birthday. He was killed on his 27th birthday.
Cops have a switch where they kick into automatic pilot. They kick into cop mode. And I've seen it so many times. They got a job to do. And they flip this switch and they do the job. And then later they go, you know. And the key for the chaplain is to check in after the cop switch has been thrown off, cop mode. We have that too. If you've ever had to do a funeral for a friend, a longtime church member, you have a switch that you have thrown. Yeah. Because you got a job to do. And it's kind of an automatic pilot. I mean, you understand what I'm talking about, don't you? You got something that has to be done. Yeah. Now, cops are real good about submerging their feelings anyway, but we tend to have feelings. I'm not sure some cops do, but that's the only way I can answer your question. You change into cop mode. You got a job to do, you do it. Not any fun. Not any fun. Other thoughts? Does this kind of give you a little bit of a handle on death notification? Okay, we're going to break for lunch. We'll start back at 1 o'clock. This afternoon we'll talk about police personality and crime scene and some things for officer support. I appreciate your questions and participation, and I hope you're getting some stuff you can use. Some of it I hope you never have to use, but